My daughter said, "Stop trying to be my dad. You're just the guy who pays for things." I replied, "Understood." Then I liquidated her college fund to pay off my mortgage and put her prized Mustang up for sale. She had to get a job the next day. I, 47M, never thought 17 words could completely destroy a relationship I'd spent 8 years trying to build. But my stepdaughter proved me wrong last Tuesday evening, and by Friday, she learned exactly what those words would cost her. The whole mess started when I came home from my accounting firm to find her Mustang's front bumper scraped and dented. The classic 1967 car I'd restored for her 16th birthday sat in our driveway, looking like she'd used it as a battering ram. I'd spent 2 years and $15,000 bringing that car back to life, working weekends in the garage while she complained about not having her own vehicle like her friends. I walked into the kitchen where she sat scrolling through her phone, acting like nothing had happened. When I asked about the damage, she barely looked up and mumbled something about a parking mishap. No apology, no acknowledgement of what that car meant, just pure indifference. I told her we needed to discuss consequences and that driving was a privilege that came with responsibilities. That's when she exploded. She threw her phone down and launched into a tirade about how I wasn't her real father and had no right to lecture her. Her voice got louder and more vicious with each word. She brought up every argument we'd ever had, every time I tried to set boundaries or teach her accountability. Then came the killing blow, delivered with ice-cold precision. She told me to stop trying to be her dad because I was just the guy who pays for things. The words hit me like a physical blow. 8 years of school events, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, driving lessons, late-night talks, and helping with homework reduced to a payment plan. 8 years of genuinely loving this kid and trying to be the father figure her biological dad never bothered to be, dismissed as some kind of banking transaction. I stood there in stunned silence while she grabbed her phone and stormed upstairs. Part of me wanted to follow and try to salvage the conversation, but her words kept echoing in my head. Just the guy who pays for things. If that's all I was to her, then maybe it was time to embrace that role completely. My wife wasn't home that evening. She was visiting her sister 3 states away and wouldn't be back until Sunday. This gave me the entire weekend to process what had happened and decide how to respond. I'd always been the type to think through major decisions carefully, analyzing all angles before acting. This situation would be no different. I spent Thursday evening going through my financial records. The college fund I'd been building for my stepdaughter since I married her mother had grown to $43,000. Every month for 8 years, I'd contributed $500, even when money was tight. I'd sacrificed vacations and delayed home improvements to make sure she'd graduate debt-free. The mortgage on our house had been my primary source of stress for months. Interest rates had climbed, and the monthly payments were stretching our budget thin. That $43,000 would reduce our debt significantly and give us breathing room. If I was just the guy who pays for things, it made sense to pay for things that actually mattered to me. Friday morning, I called the bank and initiated the transfer. The college fund would be completely liquidated by end of business. I also contacted my friend who runs a used car lot and asked him to come look at the Mustang. When he asked why I was selling, I simply told him it wasn't appreciated by its current owner. My stepdaughter had left for school that morning without a word, which was typical after our arguments. She'd usually give me the silent treatment for a few days, then gradually return to normal as if nothing had happened. This pattern had played out dozens of times over the years, with me always being the one to extend the olive branch. The car dealer arrived around noon and spent an hour examining the Mustang. Even with the front-end damage, he offered $18,000, explaining that classic muscle cars were hot commodities. I accepted his offer on the spot and told him he could pick it up Saturday morning. By 3 o'clock Friday afternoon, I'd also contacted the insurance company to remove her from our auto policy. The phone representative asked if I was sure, mentioning that re-adding a teenage driver later would be expensive. I confirmed the decision, effective immediately. The final step was updating our family phone plan. Since I was just the guy who pays for things, it seemed reasonable to stop paying for her phone service. I downgraded us to a 2-line plan, cutting her number entirely. When she walked through the door that afternoon, everything looked normal. Her phone still worked because the changes wouldn't take effect until the next billing cycle. The Mustang sat in the driveway, though it would be gone by morning. She had no idea that her entire financial support system had been dismantled in the span of 6 hours. She avoided me completely that evening, eating dinner in her room and staying upstairs until I went to bed. Part of me wondered if I was being too harsh, but then I'd remember her words and my resolve would strengthen. She'd made her position crystal clear. I wasn't her father, just a financial resource. Fine, I could work with that. Saturday morning brought chaos. The car dealer arrived at 8:30 to pick up the Mustang, backing his trailer into our driveway just as she was leaving for her weekend job at the local boutique. She worked there 15 hours a week, mainly for spending money since all her real expenses were covered by me. I watched from the kitchen window as she stopped dead in her tracks, staring at the man hooking chains to her car's wheels. She ran back inside, her face flushed with panic and anger. She demanded to know what was happening, her voice cracking with emotion. I calmly explained that since I was just the guy who pays for things, I decided to stop paying for things that weren't appreciated. The car was being sold, the college fund had been liquidated to pay down our mortgage, and her phone service would be discontinued Monday. Her reaction was explosive. She screamed about how unfair this was, how I was ruining her life, how she'd hate me forever. She threatened to call her mother, her biological father, anyone who would listen. I remained calm throughout her tantrum, simply reiterating that she'd established the nature of our relationship quite clearly. When she realized I wasn't backing down, the anger transformed into desperate bargaining. She promised to pay for the car repairs, to be more respectful, to appreciate everything I'd done for her. But her words felt hollow, motivated by loss rather than genuine remorse. I told her that actions have consequences, and her words had consequences too. She'd spent 8 years treating my efforts to parent her as unwelcome intrusions while happily accepting the financial benefits. She couldn't have it both ways anymore. The Mustang disappeared down our street at 9:15, and she spent the rest of the day locked in her room. I could hear her on the phone, probably trying to reach her mother or friends. I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Sad that it had come to this, but relieved to finally stop pretending our relationship was something it clearly wasn't. Update 1. My wife returned Sunday evening to complete chaos. Our daughter had apparently spent the entire weekend calling and texting her, painting me as some kind of monster who destroyed her future over a minor argument. When my wife walked through the door, she was already prepared for battle. She confronted me immediately, demanding explanations for what she called my cruel and unusual punishment. I sat her down and walked through everything that had led to this moment. Not just Tuesday's conversation, but years of accumulated disrespect and entitlement that I'd endured while trying to be a good stepfather. My wife initially tried to defend her daughter's behavior, suggesting that teenagers say things they don't mean when they're angry. I countered by asking why her daughter's angry words should be excused while my calm, measured response was considered unreasonable. The conversation stretched past midnight. I explained how exhausted I'd become from constantly being treated like an ATM while being rejected as a parent figure. I'd poured 8 years of love, time, and money into raising her daughter, only to be told that none of it mattered beyond the financial contributions. My wife gradually began to understand my perspective, especially when I reminded her of specific incidents over the years. The time her daughter had screamed that I wasn't her real dad during an argument about curfew. The way she'd introduce me to friends as her mom's husband rather than her stepfather. The constant resistance to any attempt at guidance or discipline. We talked about the college fund, and I showed my wife our mortgage statements to demonstrate the financial pressure we'd been under. The $43,000 would reduce our monthly payments by almost $400, money we desperately needed. If her daughter wanted college funding, she could apply for scholarships, grants, and loans like millions of other students. By 2 in the morning, my wife wasn't happy with my actions, but she understood them. She agreed that her daughter's behavior had been unacceptable and that some kind of consequence was necessary. However, she thought I'd gone too far too quickly. Update 2. Monday morning brought new drama when my stepdaughter's phone service was cut off. She'd apparently made plans with friends that fell through because she couldn't communicate with them. She missed her ride to school and had to take the bus for the first time in 2 years. When she got home that afternoon, she was a different person. The anger had been replaced by something closer to desperation. She asked if we could talk, and for the first time in months, she actually seemed willing to listen. She started by apologizing for what she'd said Tuesday night, claiming she'd been angry and didn't mean it. I told her that words have power, and she couldn't just take them back when the consequences became uncomfortable. She'd revealed how she really felt about our relationship, and I was simply responding accordingly. She tried to negotiate some kind of compromise. She'd get a job to pay for her own phone and gas money if I'd help her get another car. I explained that cars require insurance, which I was no longer willing to provide. She could certainly buy her own vehicle and insurance once she'd saved enough money. The conversation lasted over an hour, and I could see her gradually realizing how much her life was about to change. No car meant no independence. No phone meant no social connections. No college fund meant drastically altered future plans. The summer before her senior year had just become a crash course in adult responsibility. She asked if there was any way to undo the damage, whether she could somehow earn back my trust and support. I told her that trust was earned through consistent actions over time, not through promises made under duress. If she wanted to rebuild our relationship, it would take much more than apologies and bargaining. Update 3. 3 weeks have passed since what my stepdaughter now calls the worst day of her life. The changes have been dramatic and educational for everyone involved. She found a full-time summer job at a local restaurant, working 40 hours a week as a server. The money isn't great, but she's learning the value of earning her own way. She's also discovered that most of her friends weren't particularly interested in maintaining relationships that required effort on their part. The phone situation resolved itself when she used her first paycheck to buy a basic smartphone and prepaid service. No unlimited data or latest model, but enough to stay connected. She's also been researching car insurance costs and saving money for a down payment on a used vehicle. Most significantly, her attitude toward me has shifted completely. She no longer treats me like an ATM or argues with household rules. Whether this change comes from genuine respect or simple recognition of consequences doesn't really matter. The result is a more peaceful home environment. My wife has admitted that her daughter needed this reality check, though she still thinks I could have been less dramatic about delivering it. We've agreed that any future financial support will be earned rather than automatically provided. The college situation remains unresolved. My stepdaughter has been researching scholarships and student aid options, realizing for the first time that education costs money someone has to earn. She's also considering community college for her first 2 years to reduce expenses. Update 4. As summer wound down, something unexpected happened. My stepdaughter asked if she could talk to me about college planning, not to beg for money, but to get advice. She'd spent weeks researching financial aid options and wanted a second opinion on her strategy. We sat down with her laptop and went through scholarship applications, grant opportunities, and student loan options. For the first time in years, we had a conversation where she treated me like someone whose opinion mattered. She asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my responses. She'd calculated that community college plus a part-time job could cover her first 2 years without debt. After that, she could transfer to a 4-year school with a clearer idea of her major and career goals. It was actually a more responsible plan than the expensive 4-year private college she'd originally chosen. During this conversation, she brought up our relationship and how much her perspective had changed. She admitted that she'd taken my support for granted and never really considered where the money came from. Having to earn her own expenses had given her appreciation for how much I'd been providing. She also apologized again, but this time it felt different. Instead of desperate bargaining, it seemed like genuine recognition of how her words had affected me. She said she understood why I'd reacted the way I did and didn't expect forgiveness just because she was sorry. I told her that rebuilding trust would take time, but I was willing to work toward it if she was. The foundation would have to be mutual respect rather than just financial obligation. She agreed, and for the first time in months, I felt hopeful about our future relationship. Update 5. Senior year brought new challenges and continued growth. My stepdaughter maintained her job throughout the school year, working weekends and summers while keeping her grades up. She'd managed to save enough for a reliable used Honda and basic insurance coverage. More importantly, our relationship had evolved into something neither of us expected. Instead of the adversarial dynamic we'd maintained for years, we'd developed genuine mutual respect. She'd ask for advice on various topics, and I'd offer guidance without feeling like I was overstepping boundaries. The college fund remained untouched in our mortgage payments, but I'd started setting aside smaller amounts in a separate account. If she continued demonstrating maturity and responsibility, I might contribute something toward her education, but as a gift based on merit, not an automatic entitlement. Her mother had also benefited from the changes. The constant tension between her daughter and me had been draining for everyone. Now family dinners were pleasant conversations rather than careful navigation around potential conflicts. The most significant change was in how my stepdaughter viewed herself. Having to earn her own way had given her confidence and independence she'd never developed when everything was provided. She'd learned valuable lessons about money management, work ethic, and personal responsibility. As graduation approached, she thanked me for teaching her these lessons, even though the method had been painful. She said she felt better prepared for adulthood than most of her friends who were still completely dependent on their parents. Looking back, those 17 words that had seemed so devastating had actually been the catalyst for positive change we all needed. Sometimes the most valuable lessons come wrapped in the most difficult packages. The relationship I have with my stepdaughter now is built on genuine respect rather than financial obligation. She learned that words have consequences, money has to be earned, and appreciation can't be taken for granted. I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stop enabling someone's worst behaviors, even when it's painful for everyone involved. The college fund money had indeed helped our family finances, but more importantly, its absence had helped my stepdaughter discover her own strength and capabilities. She'd entered her senior year as an entitled teenager and was graduating as a young adult ready to face the real world. Whether she'd remember this lesson throughout her life remained to be seen, but she'd at least learned that relationships require mutual respect and that financial support is a privilege, not a right. Those were lessons worth the difficult journey we'd all traveled to learn them.